What happens to your country when it becomes illegal to speak the truth online? When it becomes a crime to offend the delicate sensibilities of a small but powerful faction in your country? Well, you no longer live in a free country. You cease to be living in a country that values freedom. You live in a digital tyranny. It is just that simple. A country that criminalizes Facebook posts, Instagram posts, and tweets is a tyrannical country. And world leaders who institute these laws onto their people lose the right to call their country a free country, despite whatever sound bites these leaders may wish to have. Now, our friends in Ireland are getting a front row seat as to what this tyranny really looks like right now. As the Irish government seeks to irreversibly change the demographics of Ireland by way of mass immigration, destabilizing the country by bringing in migrants at record speeds, the Irish people are being punished for speaking out about it online. Well, it all boiled over last week when an Algerian-born man who was originally supposed to be deported from Ireland but was eventually given citizenship went on a stabbing spree outside of an Irish school and sent 3 Irish children to the hospital with wounds. Dubliners took to the streets and rioted. Instead of trying to lessen the tension in Ireland to try and bring the country together, the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar decided to double down on his commitment to strengthen online hate speech legislation.
In addition to that, I think it's now very obvious to anyone who might have doubted it that our incitement hatred legislation is just not up to date. It's not up to date for the social media age, and we need that legislation through, and we need it through within a matter of weeks, because it's not just the platforms who have a responsibility here, and they do. There's also the individuals who post messages and images online that stir up hatred and violence, and we need to be able to use laws to go after them individually as well.
Because apparently the laws preventing the Irish people from speaking out online just weren't strong enough. Now, if all this sounds familiar, that's because it should. In Canada, Justin Trudeau is trying to do the exact same thing.
That's why we're going to be moving forward within 100 days of forming government on bringing in a bill on online harms and online hatred that is going to do a better job of tilting the scales a little bit towards defending people from the impacts of hateful and incitation to violence that speech that ends up getting out there.
C-36 is nearly identical to the Irish online hate speech bill, except in many cases, it seems even worse. Since Trudeau's re-election in 2021, C-36 has yet to be reintroduced. But if any Canadian was quietly hoping that maybe Justin Trudeau forgot about this tyrannical law to crack down on our free speech, well, news that broke last week would kill any of those hopes. Arif Virani, Canada's new Attorney General, last week said instituting an online hate speech law was, quote, an absolute priority. This legislation is coming, and how we as Canadians choose to respond to this bill will define what we are allowed to say for several years to come. Drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: how will you respond to an online hate speech law imposed in Canada? Let me know in the comments, and let's get into it. Well, last week, all hell broke loose in Dublin, Ireland, when an Algerian-born national went on a stabbing spree outside of a Dublin school, injuring 3 Irish schoolchildren. This Algerian-born man was supposed to be deported from Ireland in the early 2000s, but through the help of NGOs was granted Irish citizenship. The destruction in Dublin, Ireland was quite serious. Several stores had been destroyed and over 30 people had been arrested over the riots. How exactly did the Irish government respond to these riots? Well, they committed to doubling down on enforcing hate speech laws. Apparently, the online hate speech legislation isn't strong enough.
The government is addressing the extremist content online, like hate speech and incitement to violence. And Comisiún Naman is Ireland's new online safety and media regulator and will also be joint regulator along with the European Commission for the EU Digital Services Act. A draft code will be published very shortly for stakeholder consultation, and this will hold the video sharing platforms accountable for how they protect their users online and will deal with extremist content like hate speech and incitement to violence. This is a new era in which the regulators and the people they serve will be empowered to make the online world safer for all.
In order to understand the frustrations of the Irish people, you have to have a full understanding of the scope of the migrant surge taking place inside Ireland. This is from the New York Post. In the 12 months leading up to April this year, 141,600 immigrants landed in Ireland. The Irish population has increased by more than 2%. If the US had similar immigration, it would mean 9 million extra people. Last year, more than 13,000 people from non-Ukrainian origin entered Ireland, a 400% spike over 2021. This, according to the New York Post, has made an already devastating housing shortage a catastrophe. And just as migrants have been flooding into Ireland, the crime rate in Ireland has been skyrocketing. Ireland's murder rate in 2023 has doubled from the year before. And according to the Irish Times, there's also been a similar spike in robbery, extortion, hijacking, and assaults. Now, as you have probably guessed, none of this has made the Irish people all too happy. And one of the loudest voices speaking up on behalf of the Irish people has been UFC superstar Conor McGregor. It all really started for McGregor when he told his 10 million followers that Ireland is at war. And from that point on, he has been loudly criticizing Leo Varadkar and the Irish government's failure to protect the Irish people. For example, this tweet that Conor McGregor posted might have really triggered some leftists. Because unlike so many, Conor McGregor has decided that speaking the truth is better than staying silent. One of the most horrific crimes this nation ever seen has occurred. We do not care anymore what you sad cases have got to say. In a war, you are nothing. We are not backing down. We are only warming up. There will be no backing down until real change is implemented for the safety of our nation. We are not losing any more of our women and children to sick and twisted people who should not even be in Ireland in the first place. Call it what you want. We do not care. May God help us all. Ireland for victory. That is just one of several social media posts that Conor McGregor has been making to his 10 million followers, which, of course, has resulted in the Irish government investigating Conor McGregor for hate speech. That, in Ireland, is what constitutes hate speech. In fact, the spray-painted words of Irish Lives Matter, according to the BBC, is a hate incident. That's a hate crime, to say Irish Lives Matter. It's also apparently anti-immigration. Sinn Féin, the Irish Nationalist Party, has described the words Irish Lives Matter as disgraceful. Now, Black Lives Matter, that's totally fine. Immigrant Lives Matter, I'm sure that would also pass. But when you say Irish Lives Matter in Ireland, or dare you say even worse, White Lives Matter, that is really dangerous stuff. So remember, the graffitied words Irish Lives Matter is being investigated as a hate incident. Conor McGregor's tweets on X are also being investigated as a hate crime. But you know who's not being investigated for a hate crime in Ireland right now, as far as we can tell? Irish councillor Azad Taluqdar. Taluqdar said of the Irish Dublin rioters that he'd like to see them shot in the head. I'd like to see them shot in the head or bring the public in and beat them until they die, Taluqdar said to his fellow council members at the council chamber. Now, Taluqdar, of course, withdrew his comments, but whether or not his words will be investigated for maybe inciting hatred, I doubt that'll happen. Even though the Irish people seem to be barred from criticizing mass immigration at all, in fact, they're not even allowed to say that their own people's lives matter, the Irish government officials have no problem telling their own country that their country is far too white.
During that oppression, we still maintained our invisibility cloak of white privilege.
And we often hear about white privilege, and it hadn't really occurred to me that I had white privilege as well. But now, listening to you, I understand that I do have a privilege.
I think we shouldn't forget that our Parliament still looks very male, very stale and pale.
Of course you can say that. You're a middle-class white man.
You, as a white privileged man, how does my debt impact your life?
I think it's worth putting on the record of this House that concept of white privilege.
Much more so in the very dull, white, pasty Ireland that I grew up in. I think what we need to do in our own political system is to call out the hypocrisy of standing in a parliament like this, full of white people. The Ireland that I grew up in was made for people just like me. It was made for white, middle-class, able-bodied, heterosexual men.
Now, the Irish online hate speech bill already is insane. Now Leo Varadkar is trying to strengthen it, but as it stands right now, indictment to violence or hatred against persons on account of their protected characteristics up to 5 years in prison. It is an offense to prepare or possess material likely to incite violence or hatred against persons on account of their protected characteristics. The punishment for that? Up to 2 years in jail. For possessing material which will likely incite violence or hatred. Think about that and how dangerous that really is. Well, in Canada, we really ought to be thinking about this. Justin Trudeau has not been trying to hide his intent of introducing Bill C-36, the online harms bill. If Bill C-36 is reintroduced and passed in Parliament exactly as it was back in 2021, the bill will criminalize any form of online speech if somebody believes it is motivated by bias, hatred, or prejudice toward any protected characteristic in the Canadian Human Rights Act. A Canadian could be hauled before a human rights tribunal and be forced to pay the government up to $50,000 or an anonymous accuser $20,000. That's right, you won't even know who is accusing you of committing online hate speech, but you'll still have to pay them thousands of dollars for the crime of offending their sensibilities. The worst part about Bill C-36 is that someone can go to a judge and have you severely punished if they think you might commit an act of online hate speech. Not that you've posted anything yet, but that you might do something wrong. Pre-crime. Severely punished for not even committing a crime. As it says in the text of the legislation right here, a person may, with the Attorney General's consent, lay an information before a provincial court judge if the person fears on reasonable grounds that another person will commit an offense motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate. This commitment to reintroduce Bill C-36, if re-elected, can be found in the Liberal Party website right now. They are not hiding their intent to do this. But make no mistake about it, this would be the end of freedom of speech in Canada, or whatever is left of it. Let's also be honest about something else. Justin Trudeau has very little to lose at this point. If an election were held today, he would lose by a large margin. But if Trudeau can pass Bill C-36 and criminalize any form of online debate over the single biggest issue of our time, mass immigration, that could have serious implications on this country. And it also could help Justin Trudeau force his mass immigration agenda through government without having to listen to the public outcry on social media. The Irish people may be going through it right now, but make no mistake about it, this is coming to Canada. All right, time for the ratio of the week. The winner this week is Liberal MP Ken Hardy. After a shooting in Winnipeg, Ken Hardy did what any sane person would do and immediately go out and attack Pierre Poilievre for, I guess, inciting the shooting somehow. This is what Hardy wrote on social media. Beyond troubling to see another mass shooting in Canada, now in Winnipeg, and we've lost so many police officers. Might it be the antisocial, burn everything down, far-right attitudes we're seeing creeping in from the US, and the creep on the Canadian side, Pierre Poilievre? Over 3.6 thousand replies to only 467 likes for Ken Hardy here. Look at this comment with 1.6 thousand likes. This is a despicable post. I guess nothing is beneath liberals these days. This comment has over 1,000 likes. Imagine blaming the official opposition instead of the government in power for 8 years for what has the appearance of drug-related homicides. And how about this comment from Michael Tomlinson? Or might it be the misplaced and expensive waste of resources attacking legal gun owners, hunters, and sport shooters, rather than concentrating on gangs, criminals, and illegal firearms? Your fault, in other words, Ken. Your government, your failures. Well said. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us this week on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.